All right, good morning. Today, Doug and I are joined by Marc Victor, who is a lawyer and has lots of really interesting things to talk to us about today, including this new movement he's really supporting. But Marc, we have lots of legal questions for you too, in addition to just hearing about the movement. But first, you're in Medellin, Colombia. What brings you there?
Well, I'm here for the Liberty International Conference, which hasn't actually started yet, and really looking forward to it. I'm excited because, this is really, if we're going to change the world, the people who are interested in changing the world and who have an idea about what's involved in making that happen need to meet and get together and talk it out. And I needed to present them with this new idea here called Live and Let Live, which I think if we are going to change the world, it's going to be through the Live and Let Live vehicle.
I love it. So you mentioned, as we just started to come on, about you're recovering from the arduous journey down there. I always like to get the latest on international travel. What was it like?
Well, I wouldn't mind having to wear the, as they say, face diaper, the entire trip, if it was actually a voluntary decision on the airlines, right? Which could be a reasonable decision because, and if I'm an airline owner, then my attitude might be and should be, what can I do to attract more customers to my business? And there's a valid argument, I think, that lots of people are concerned about corona and maybe have been vaccinated or not vaccinated, whatever, but may prefer to fly an airline where they have to wear a face mask the entire time. But I suspect there's also airline owners who might feel differently about that and say, there's a significant amount of the market that would love to just fly and not have to wear a mask. But unfortunately, at least in the United States, as usual, the government has made a one size fits all type of a decision. Again, I take no position on whether an owner of a business, not just the airlines, but any business, what rules they make. My position is simply they're the ones who should be making the rule. They're the owners of the business. And let's let the market decide. I mean, imagine if the airlines could do this, not just for masks, but for lots of different things, right? Like smoking or maybe bringing a gun on board. Yeah, that's not so crazy. I think there's a significant amount of the population that would say, I feel safer with not just a gun, but everybody having guns. And maybe there'd be rules about that. Like people should show some ability to have, operate the firearm. Maybe they shouldn't have a round in the chamber. I don't know what the market would want, but wouldn't it be great if we could get what we want, which is really freedom, and have the owners of the businesses, I know this is a novel idea, but have the owners of the businesses make the rule under which both the employees can work there and the customers can enter the business. So that's, look, I think it's a mistake for us to take any particular position on what rule they choose, right? I mean, I know a lot of freedom type people are upset about the rules on masks, but the wisdom or lack thereof of the rule that the property owner or business owner makes isn't our jurisdiction. Our position is that they should be the ones making the rule and the market should decide whether they like the rule or not like the rule. So yes, I was forced into wearing a mask the entire time. It's probably not a secret to anybody listening to this that I definitely would have chosen a different airline if I could have. I prefer to breathe freely while I'm traveling, but I was subjected to partial suffocation the entire way, especially where you're dealing with such strict enforcement. Like once or twice, I had the mask slipped under my nose and one of the flight attendants, put it over your nose again. And so it wasn't a pleasant journey here, needless to say, but I'm here and I'm happy to be here. And I'm really, really excited to be presenting this Live and Let Live movement to other pro-freedom people.
So listen, how are things in Medellin? Are they locked down now? Just on this last subject before we leave it.
Well, I haven't been here that long, but when I see people forced to wear masks outside, which is a place that it seems all sides generally agree, this isn't a high likelihood of contracting any particular virus on outside in the fresh air. But here, everybody is required to wear a mask both inside and outside. So I put that in the kind of crazy category. So, but other than that, things are open. Restaurants are open. People are free to go and, travel in different places, but you got to be wearing the mask. And I wonder how many restaurant owners and different business owners might choose a different rule. And, we don't really know because we don't know what the market would select yet because we haven't run that test. But maybe people do like the idea of having to wear masks. I know here in Colombia, I believe not a lot of people are vaccinated, and I think that might change the minds of a significant segment of the people. I think a lot of people feel like, well, hell, if I've endured the risk of being vaccinated, I should at least not have to wear the face mask anymore. I should be able to freely move around. But now we're in this crazy position where whether you're vaccinated or not, it seems as if it doesn't make any difference. So look, it's no news to anybody who's going to be watching this interview that the world is kind of crazy at the moment. And so I guess I'm confirming that fact.
It's still that way there then, because the masks were required outdoors when I was there in December as well. So, and the penalties for the fines essentially for violating it are like $300, I think, which is it's not cheap, obviously, for an American, but it is incredibly onerous for a Colombian. I mean, that's the average monthly salary. So, that's why I was never fined. I didn't wear a mask. But, people can follow rules if they want, I guess. I have legal questions for you, if you don't mind. And Doug, please jump in at any time. But I'm just, the world seems so different today than it did a few years ago, that my faith in the rule of law has been shaken, to say the least. And not to say I was ever, my confidence was ever really that high, but, as a man who's devoted his life to the law, protecting people's freedoms, defending people's rights. I'm just curious what your take is on whether or not my perception about the erosion of individual rights or equal justice under the law is real or not. Because I see things like the McCloskeys in St. Louis and, Kyle Rittenhouse and situations like that, where it feels like if you're defending yourself, then at all, and you find yourself in a position where you have to defend yourself, it used to be like more open and shut, where it was clear, especially when there's so much evidence, that you were just defending yourself, and that's okay. Whereas now it seems like that's not necessarily the case at all. Is it a slippery slope? Are we changing, or is it just my perception of it?
Well, it's a bit of a complex question. I don't know how much time you want to spend on it, but let me first say, my area of expertise is criminal law. Almost 30 years now, I've been practicing as a criminal defense lawyer. I don't dabble in the little dinky cases. I do major felonies. I've tried several death penalty cases, first-degree murder cases at 2 juries. We do a lot of very serious stuff, state, federal, across the country. I have cases in other states. I represent one of the people charged in the Capitol riot on January 6th. And so I have a lot of expertise there. I've done a lot of appeals. I've argued at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on several occasions. And so that's my area of expertise. I know quite a bit about the other areas as well. I've recently been admitted to the bar in Hawaii. And the only way to get in there is to take the bar exam again. So after about 25 years of practicing criminal, I had to reboot on all the other areas of the law. So the reason I tell you this is because there's an important distinction here. There are some parts of our legal, and I can really only speak about the law in the United States. Our problems with the legal system are not a function of our ability to conduct a trial, or even with judges being corrupt or anything like that. That is not our major problem, nor is racism our major problem. I know it's very fashionable today to say our justice system is replete with institutional racism. I can tell you, have not had one occasion in almost 30 years of practicing law to stand up and say, hey, I think my client, and I've represented many people from many different ethnicities, is being treated differently because of the color of their skin or something like that. I've never had that occasion. I've been looking for this for a long time. Most judges are not corrupt. Most judges actually follow the law. And I know this is a controversial thing to say. The problem is not the judges, although, look, we could do a lot better with judges, right? These things can all be improved. I don't intend to be saying the system is perfect. The problem is the substantive law. And most judges will follow the law. If we got our way in the criminal justice system, what we really want to do is delete victimless crimes, right? We think the entire drug war should be ended. We think prostitution among consenting adults ought to be legal, so long as there's no pimp, right? There should be no force or fraud or coercion. We think gambling laws are wrong. If we could get rid of all of the victimless crimes, which all the drug crimes, every single last one of them, from manufacture to sale to transportation, not just use, but all of them. In all of the victimless gun crimes, right? Things like, oh, your serial number was obliterated, the barrel was a little too long. These don't violate the rule that we so much love, that libertarians call the non-aggression principle, that we live and let livers call the live and let live principle, which, just to summarize, is don't initiate force, don't get involved in fraud, don't coerce other people, and do not do things that subject other people or their property to substantial risks of harm. If you can refrain from doing that, and you must refrain from doing that, if we catch you doing that, we should do everything we can to stop you. But if you refrain from doing that, you should be absolutely left alone. So if we just deleted the victimless crimes from the criminal justice system, while there would be many things to improve still, we'd find a much better system. The first thing I would improve, by the way, that I would change about the system is the jury. The people on the juries, the way we select juries right now, we're asking average citizens who have no concept of things like burdens of proof and presumptions and of esoteric ideas about mens rea, whether somebody is acting intentionally, recklessly, negligently, grossly negligent. These are not decisions that the average ordinary citizen is very well equipped to address. We really need professional jurors. I don't mean necessarily people selected by the state or things like this. I'm talking about ordinary citizens who want to be jurors, who have gone through some kind of a class or a course where I don't have to spend 40 minutes in a closing argument educating them about what it means to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt or things of that nature. They should come prepared for that. And the juries get it wrong in lots of cases because they use what we call in the law the preponderance standard. That's how we all ordinarily operate. Who do I believe more, this side or this side? Well, that's not what a criminal case is about. A criminal case, because we make a judgment that it's better for 10 guilty people to go free than one innocent to be convicted, right? If you're actually going to be an innocent, or imagine a world where we follow the principle. If you're not somebody who's inclined to violate the principle, then what we're really worried about is being wrongfully convicted. People violate the principle and we don't get them sometimes. Okay, that's not as bad. And so I'd prefer to have jurors who understand this stuff. We can improve a lot of this. There are areas in every area, even how we conduct trials could be improved. But if you really looked at what a trial was and how the rules of evidence operate and how people you don't have to speak at your trial and you get cross-examination, and the trial is pretty good. It could be improved, but a lot of smart people over hundreds and hundreds of years have worked to try to refine how do we resolve these kinds of disputes, and have done a pretty good job at it. So what I'm really saying here is, it's my opinion, we should not focus on things like the justice system is corrupt, we got to throw out all the judges, or any of this stuff. What we should focus on is changing the law so that we don't have victimless crimes in the system. Other than that, I also will go further and say most of the judges who I've met will ignore their personal opinions and still follow the law. I've seen this on many occasions, even judges who will say things from the bench like, look, I don't like that I have to do this. I wish I didn't. Take, for example, mandatory minimum sentences, which is another huge problem here. Lots of judges will say things like, look, I wish I wasn't restricted by the law to do this, that, or the next thing, but I'm going to follow the law because that's my job. So what I'm getting to here is we should focus on changing the law. If we could get the law changed, we'd realize a much freer, more productive society that would dramatically increase standards of living. And that's what libertarians really are mostly focused on. That's what we're talking about when we talk about the non-aggression principle. It's changing the law. But what I would add to that, and the reason why I think we need to move towards a live and let live position, is because live and let live is pushing some ethical values, some principles that are not legal principles. These, of course, people are free to ignore, right? We're pushing things like open-mindedness and tolerance and voluntary kindness and civility. Look, you could say, screw that, Mark. I'm not interested in being open-minded or tolerant or civilized. Fine. I support your right to be a jerk. to be uncivilized, to be unruly, whatever. So long as you don't violate that principle, that's okay. But if we really want to get to a peaceful society, and more importantly, we want to convince our fellow brothers and sisters, we need to add some values. We don't want to go too far with this because we don't all agree on morality, but there are some basic ideas that I don't feel bad about pushing. And this is one of the things that Live and Let Live as a peace movement contrasted with libertarianism, a freedom movement. Freedom is a necessary prerequisite to get to peace, but you need something else. And I would say you need ethical values to get to peace. And so that's why we're pushing. So I guess the long and short of it is the procedural law, the stuff about even some of the rules on police officers and interactions in the streets, right? If we could get rid of the victimless crime, so police officers, reasonable suspicion that you have marijuana is meaningless if marijuana is not against the law. Those laws and rules are generally pretty good too. I mean, they're not that bad. We could go through criminal procedure and you probably would conclude, okay, a police officer needs to have a certain level of articulable facts that amount to something we call reasonable suspicion before they can pull you over. Okay, that seems reasonable. They need something more than that. We call probable cause to make an arrest and haul you in. And then you get a trial, which should be beyond a reasonable doubt. There are some things that, like I said, we should change, but to focus our energy on that area is a waste of time. Even though I don't want to be misunderstood. It could be improved, but our biggest problem is the substantive law.
Well, I think that what I admire about what you're trying to do with this movement is you're trying to essentially raise the bar on the conversation where actually there's a lot of agreement among almost everybody, and I think rather than going down in the weeds where you can find division if you're willing to go far enough down. I think it's really smart to like meta the conversation up like that. But I do think that the reason that a lot of people feel this division is because of things that seem like double standards. And yeah, okay, I can definitely agree with the idea of that around judges and that whole system. That once it gets to that stage, that there are rules and procedures, and people are generally of good intent in doing it. But what about when you see like the prosecutorial discretion that leaves Antifa people out? With zero prosecutions, and then, and meanwhile you have others who, perhaps like the people that you might be representing for January 6th, that are, the books thrown at them essentially,
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a problem for sure. But the remedy for this problem is at the ballot box. I mean, usually prosecutors are elected, and they ought to be elected, right? Because these are people who represent the people, and we do want to afford discretion. Not all laws should be equally enforced. I mean, there are some things that are less serious than other things, and I think it's reasonable for a prosecutor to say, look, I want to spend our precious resources going after murderers, rapists, and robbers, and the guy that's exceeding the speed limit by 5 miles an hour. Okay, let's give that guy a break. Who cares? We don't want enforcement of every single thing to the letter of the law. So I like the idea of actually electing prosecutors, and then when they don't act appropriately by not bringing prosecutions against one side or the other, we should vote them out and vote in other people. This is one of the few areas that I actually do think a democratic vote makes sense. The people are entitled to pick somebody to prosecute crimes for them. So the short answer is I agree with you. Everybody should be treated equally under the law, but we have the wrong people in important positions right now. I mean, maybe I go so far as to say we got monkeys running the system right now. These are people who do not understand or agree with the principles that we're promoting. How do we fix this? The short-term fix, let's get rid of this guy and get another guy in. But if we want a real fix, the real fix is the same real fix that has existed since the beginning of time. We need to convince more people to our position. When we get that done, then we'll get people who have the right ideas in their hearts and minds as prosecutors and as judges and as jurors and as people in society. And until we get that done, everything else is just a short-term patch, a fix. We need to convince, this is the mission of the Live and Let Live movement, stated succinctly, convince more people. How many more? Enough to change things. Not everybody. Like the American Revolution was about a third. Maybe we need a third. convince enough people to change their hearts and minds so we can then do what matters, which is control the mechanisms, right? The rule of humanity has always been he who has the biggest gun makes the rules. Whether we like it or not, sometimes stated as might makes right. I don't agree with that because it doesn't make it right. Might makes reality. I agree with that. What are we really saying? We need the biggest gun and we're going to impose the rules. What rules are we going to impose? Don't fear, because they're good rules. They're the non-aggression principle or the live and let live principle. But we're not going to hear that sorry from the guy who wants to commit a theft or a robbery or something. I'm not open to an argument from that guy that, hey, I didn't consent to this rule. You can't hold me to this rule. Too bad. I say, whether you like it or not, you have to comply with the live and let live rule. We're not seeking their consent any more than the guys running the show now are seeking our consent. That's just a fact of the world. And so I think we need to be honest about this. We need more people so we can start making the rules. We're going to make the rules that we think are right, which are rules that promote peace and freedom and higher standards of living. We can make this argument if we lead with the principle and add some values in and don't act like a bunch of idiots and start talking about issues without first explaining the principle and start arguing about factual disputes, like things like Corona, right? This is a factual dispute. Is Corona deadly? Is it communicable? Or how deadly is it? How communicable is it? These are important questions that if we hypothetical, right? I could say to you, Matt, imagine a virus that's very, very deadly and very, very communicable. And now let's apply the principle. I could also say, imagine a virus that's not so deadly, will kill some people, people with comorbidities and things like this and that, maybe not so communicable, and we can apply the principle there. But what the biggest problem we're facing right now, I think, in the world is a failure to agree on facts. This is a very serious problem. We have a total distrust of institutions and experts. And so there's a lot of people, even in our movement, who have so embedded this distrust of experts that they don't believe anything anybody says, no matter what evidence, no matter what data is presented. People will say, they're working for the government or there's some nefarious plot behind it. So we can't really get any traction even in talking about this issue, which is why I recommend what we do is we talk about it as a hypothetical. Let's agree on stipulated. This is what we lawyers do, right? Let's agree on stipulated set of facts and now talk about how we think the principle should be applied. And also, part of our philosophy is leaving as many decisions as possible to local communities, right? That way we get the experiment of smaller communities experimenting with the rules, and it's easy for people to say, you know what, I don't like the rule in this town, I'll move to the next town. And then we can let the market decide which rules are most freedom and peace promoting and which aren't. And then, of course, as you know, this will attract towns and cities with bad rules to say, hey, we're losing our community. Maybe we should change our rules to try to attract more people. There are ways that we can really improve the world, but unless and until we start talking about the principle and putting it out there and first selling the principle before, critically important, before we start talking about issues, we're never going to convince people. We have to explain why we want to end the drug war. It's not because, like a lot of people think, we just like smoking weed or something like that, or we don't care about other people using heroin or something. It's only because there's a certain principle, which is if you're not violating that principle, which an adult who is using on their own property doesn't, but an adult who gets in their car and drives down the road in a reckless manner that puts other people at risk because they're high or drunk or tired or poor driving ability or something, that violates the rule. And that's the reason we can stop you from doing that. There's no other reason here. It's not that we're saying it's a good thing to smoke weed or a bad thing to smoke weed. That's your decision to make. So until we start talking about the principle and selling that first, we're never going to get any traction. And that's one of the many differences between the live and let live movement and the traditional libertarian approach.
I got it. And I agree. And I do agree with that. But Doug, I wonder, what's your, I mean, you and I talk all the time. So I think that you're less optimistic about that things can change. What's your view on some of the things that Marc has said so far?
Everything Marc says is tremendously reasonable. And I agree with just about everything that Marc says, quite frankly. I love him individually and philosophically. However, there is a false premise that seems to be embedded in this. And it was early on in what you just said. It's that voting is the answer. We'll vote for better people, get rid of this guy, but then we'll vote in a better guy and so forth. And that's.
That, Doug, by the way, I didn't say voting was the answer. I said good way to elect a county attorney.
Oh, well, I'm not sure we need a county attorney. Here's why I say that. What you said is that we really ought to have professional jurors who are qualified to do what they're doing. Well, maybe we should have professional, which is to say non-elected prosecutors and professional judges. In other words, arbitration agencies. Replace the political system with appointees and the whim of the public electing things, and have people that have to compete with each other on the intelligence and the low cost and the fairness and the speed of their decisions, whether that be a prosecutor who, if you're offended, you go out and you hire a paladin to pursue it. And then that might be a better way of doing it. And before it goes to an arbitration agency, the other person, if he wants to play within the system and not be an outlaw, has to hire his own defender. And they both go before an independent, mutually agreed upon judge to arbitrate that. I mean, I think that would be, is that part of the whole live and let live system, or is that just a technical detail?
No, I think first of all, I agree with what you've said. We're not in disagreement here at all. What I would like to see is all of these functions entirely privatized. And so what would happen is the community would say, there's 10 different companies out there that offer prosecutorial services. Maybe some of them package it in with judging services or juror services. I don't know what the market's going to bring. And let's hire one of those professional corporations to come in and administer our justice system. We're already doing this with private prisons. I know a lot of people don't like private prisons because they think, and this is probably the case, that because of what I call crony capitalism, they get to send money to representatives who pass laws to put more bodies in prison, and this is in their personal interest. I get all of this, but the actual private prison itself runs perfectly fine. In fact, I can tell you, as a consumer of people who I'm a guy who goes and has attorney-client meetings at government-run prisons and at private-run jails and prisons, and I can assure you the private ones are much better. They're much more responsive. They care. They don't want me to complain to the judge that, hey, I can't get a private attorney-client meeting. It's hard, this and that. They want to keep their contract. I love that. But at the end of the day, the community still has to make a decision about which corporation to hire. I don't find any problem whatsoever with the community either A, appointing somebody to make this decision, or B, even directly voting on it. In other words, who does the community want to hire to administer our justice system? Let's just talk about police for a moment. All this craziness about defunding the police, and when police do things we don't like, we're really stuck with it, aren't we? Wouldn't it be great if the community could say, you know what, we don't like how this police force has been administering the justice system. They're using excessive force and this, that, and the next thing. Let's not renew their contract. There are 10 other companies out there that offer to bring in, and they all have different arguments, right? Some of them will say, look, our cops are trained this way or that way, and here's how they feel about excessive force and all the various things that private companies might come up with to sell their services. The community still has to make a decision. And one of the things that in the Live and Let Live movement we don't want to do is get into the weeds of arguing about these kinds of things. So the most I would say as a live and let liver is the community can come up with any particular way they want to administer this, however they decide. I can think of lots of different ways. What would I personally favor? I think it takes a little bit more knowledge and attention to really look through this decision than have the average butcher, baker, candlestick maker to decide. And so what I favor is maybe having a group of people in the community who to take a hard look at this and really talk to people and evaluate how communities who's this provider of services, how they like them, and to research it, and then they will make a decision here. So look, there are many ways to do this. I don't really care which way. The market will decide. At the end of the day, I think it would be far better to have private companies competing in a free market like we do in other areas to provide the services in the justice system, like hamburgers and hot dogs. The best hamburgers and hot dogs come from a competing free market. The best justice system will too.
How convincing has, because you said ultimately the purpose of this organization is to try and win, hearts and minds, basically win people over to your side. How successful has it been in doing that to date?
Well, okay, great question. Let me say the movement hasn't even kicked off yet. We're intending to kick it off in March of 2023. And the reason for that is we don't want to just kick off a movement without having any of the groundwork done. So what we've done so far is we've put up a website. It's a temporary website. It's at liveandletlive.org. And I would encourage everybody who's listening to this podcast or can hear the sound of my voice, just check out liveandletlive.org. You'll see some videos there, a short video of 1 minute, which isn't my preference. Doug knows me a long time, and Doug knows I'd much prefer to give a 3-hour presentation. But I'm told by people much smarter than me that I got about 1 minute. So what I did is I took the liberty to do 2 1-minute videos. I do one 1 minute, then another 1 minute. Then I condensed down my 3-hour pitch to about an 8-minute, because people are going to watch those 2 1-minute videos and they're going to say, you know what, I love it, but okay, the details, the devil's in the details. What does it all mean to live and let live? So there's an 8-minute video there that puts a lot more meat on the bones. And then we've done the Peace Radicals podcast, which Doug Casey is going to appear on soon. I'm looking forward to questioning him about lots of hard issues. And we're pushing that out there. So by the time we kick off the movement, what I am intending to have is a much more world-class website, because the goal is I want to push people to that website so they can understand. I want them to be able to sign up and join the movement, maybe have an opportunity to donate some money to the movement. I'd like to have some chapters all over the world. We already have lots of different chapters in lots of different countries and continents, from Australia to Europe, in many different places within those continents, in other places all the time. So we're struggling right now with, do we put money into fixing up the website? Do we put money into the chapters? Do we put money into promoting the podcast and things of this nature? And so we're really laying out the groundwork. But I will tell you this. I have found from 30 years of talking to people about this stuff, there are more effective ways to discuss it. And you should try this experiment too. The next time you meet somebody who you don't know, a new person in your life, and the conversation drifts into something political, Biden's doing this or Trump or whatever, I think try this experiment. Take a step back and say, you know what? I'm just a live and let live kind of guy. And what you'll find is almost everybody, in fact, I say almost because I haven't talked to everybody yet, but everybody I've talked to has said, me too. I love live and let live. You can really lock them into that. Don't you think the world would be great if we all just adopted this live and let live? People will say yes, 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 yes. Then we got to get into the philosophy.
But Mark, they all say, yeah, me too. But because they've all got their private hobby horse.
Well, that's where we're going next. That's where I'm going next. You have to do this in a certain order. First, you get them to agree with the statement, live and let live. And then you say, you know what does it mean? It means what it says. What does it mean to not live and let live? Well, if you're an aggressor, if I'm hitting you over the head, am I acting in conformity with live and let live? And everybody will say, no, that definitely violates the rule. So now we're in business. I can say, well, if you're an aggressor, then you're not living in accordance with live and let live. I definitely will get it right on that 100% of the time. From there, I will explain force, fraud, coercion. If they're more sophisticated, I'll point out putting people at substantial risks of harm. I'll get a yes on that. Then, and this is a step we libertarians forget about, but it's critically important. We got to say, now, that rule applies to every person, doesn't it? I'll get a yes on that. Sometimes I'll embellish that a little by saying black or white or rich or poor or fat or thin or wherever you're born, whatever language. Yes, 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 it should apply to everybody. Then I'll say, what if we formed a little group? What if me and Matt and Doug formed a little group? Do we get to now be aggressors? I'll always get a definitely no. Why should you get to be an aggressor just because you formed a group? So from there, I'll bash on corporations a little. I'll say even big groups, right? Like those evil corporations. Why would we ever want a corporation to initiate force or fraud or coercion or to do things that put us at big risks of harm? and especially from the left, I'll get a definitely, we should not let those corporations violate the rule. Then the critically important step of even the biggest groups of all, governments. Why would we ever want a government to initiate force, fraud, coercion, or put at substantial risks? Now, if I get a yes on that, which so far I'm batting 100% here. If I get a yes on that, then I just got everything Doug Casey wanted, and everything Walter Block wanted, and everything Murray Rothbard wanted. Because if the government can't violate that rule, I don't care what you're calling it. I don't care what it does. If it doesn't violate the rule, I'm done. So then from there, after I've established that, I still haven't talked about any issues yet, right? After that, I'll start talking about the aspirational values. I do this for two reasons. One, because we libertarians have done a horrible job explaining the difference between a legal rule and a moral rule. We got to get people to the point where they can say, yes, I think prostitution is immoral, if they think that, and a lot of people do, but I also think that because the rule's not violated, it should be legal. Once somebody says that to me, I know the light bulb has gone off, right? So I talk about the aspirational values, but then like I did at the beginning of this discussion, I immediately go to none of these should be incorporated into the law because these are ethics rules. And if we want peace and freedom, we have to all agree to pull our own personal morality, even the good stuff, the stuff that me and Bernie Sanders agree upon. And this is what I would say to my brother Bernie. I'd say, brother Bernie, me and you are pretty close. We agree on almost everything. You think we should help those who are less fortunate. I agree with you. You think we should make it so people have access to health care and education. I'm in total agreement. I love you, Bernie. We agree. There's one thing we disagree on, one small point. You think these are legal issues. You want to import our positions into the law. I think these are moral issues. And even though we're in agreement with them, I don't want to put even our good morality into the law. And you know why I don't want to do that, Bernie? The reason I don't want to do that is because somebody, maybe a Muslim, is going to step up and say, you know, we have moral rules too. It's called Sharia law. And we think women should wear headscarves. And how do you think about that? Well, there's only really two ways we can respond. One, sorry, our morality is better than your morality. We're going to force ours on you and not let you force yours on ours. We know where this leads to. This is an endless war of all against all. Or option two, the one I favor, the one that says, look, I take no position on your morality. Maybe it's a very nice morality. But we've all agreed for the sake of freedom and peace that even the morality we agree with, we're pulling all of that out of the law. The law is really basic. It's don't violate the live and let live rule, which we've already talked about. Everything else, we want to inspire people to act morally, right? You should be voluntarily kind. Bernie, let's promote that. Let's try to get the good people of the world to help those less fortunate. Let's really do it. Let's really set up a private charity and try to make it happen. And let's join together on this project because we're in agreement. This is the only point of disagreement. Now, we're not going to get every liberal here, but if we lead with the aspirational values and we join forces with them on the morality point, which we can, there are a lot of good people on the left who do want good things for the right reasons. What they fail to see is they're imposing their morality on everybody else. And this creates this war of all against all. So if we can convince them on this point, we can snag some of those lefties to our camp. We don't need everybody, but if we get to 1/3, watch out because we're going to start running the show. Now, I don't know of another formula to actually get what we want. If you guys got something better than me, I will abandon what I'm doing right now and join forces with you. But I think this is the best blueprint to actually get us to move in the bus in the right direction without compromising the philosophy one bit, and also presenting it in a way that people like. And when we lead the discussion with, I think meth should be legal, or fuck the government, or taxes are theft, or something like that, which we all still agree with. But when we lead the discussion with that, or even socialism sucks, because I don't say that anymore, then we lose them and they don't listen to anything else we're going to say. I don't argue about capitalism or socialism anymore. You might be surprised. All I say is don't violate the rule. So what's left? Free market capitalism doesn't violate the rule. Crony capitalism does. Voluntary socialism doesn't violate the rule. And I say, hey, if you guys want to get together and pool your resources and pay for bills jointly, maybe you'll convince me to join. Let's see what you come up with. Coercive socialism, where you get together and agree and then drag people into it who don't want to be dragged in. I don't need to argue about Laffer curves or economics or anything here. The only thing I need to say is because it violates the rule, I'm against it, period. So I don't even have to turn off our socialist friends. I can invite them to stay socialists so long as they don't violate the rule. I don't argue about the size of government anymore. I don't say what Doug Casey says, like we should eliminate the government. I say whatever government size you favor doesn't bother me a bit. Big, small, none, have fun. As long as your government doesn't violate the rule, that's all I care about. Why do I need to say anything else? I don't think I do.
That is an excellent disquisition. It's
Bam.
live and let live, get along and go along. It's very non-aggressive, very reasonable. But listen, I'm 100% on your side. And I do think the way to do this is to win hearts and minds one at a time. But unfortunately, not all of us have your temperament or your rhetorical skills. Now, if I'm ever indicted for a serious crime, Mark, I'm going to have pictures in my Rolodex. But it's tough to make this case to hundreds of millions of people. Forget about billions. What do you think, Mark?
First of all, we don't need everybody. This is a false position. The American Revolution didn't get everybody. No movement has ever gotten everybody. We don't need everybody.
No,
In fact, if you watch the videos, if you watch our videos on our website, you'll see the call is for the reasonable people of the world. Now, let me be a bit cocky about this for a moment. If you disagree with the live and let live principle, what you are actually saying is, I think it's okay to be an aggressor. That's what you're actually saying. That's what it means to disagree with what I'm presenting. Well, if you're an aggressor, then you can't be reasoned with. That's the nature of being an aggressor. So you are by definition unreasonable. Not only are you unreasonable, you're also a hypocrite. Because I can guarantee people who take this position certainly don't want force initiated against them. So I'm not trying to speak to the unreasonable hypocrites of the world. Now, I don't necessarily put it in those terms because I'm trying to actually build bridges and talk to people. But I am reaching out to the reasonable people of the world. And I'm trying to appeal to them with the aspirational values and with the obvious correctness of our principle. Just the notion that being an aggressor is wrong. If you're reasonable, you'll agree with that. And if you're consistent, you'll agree with the implementation of all of this on all of the major issues. But we can't expect them to agree with us unless and until we first sell this principle. And if we don't lead with the principle and we lead with the issues, we'll never get this across. So I'm not reaching out. Look, if I got to spend more than 60 seconds with you convincing you that being an aggressor is the wrong thing to do, I'm going to carefully watch my wallet as I turn around and walk away from you. But I'm not going to waste my time on planet Earth talking to unreasonable people who say, I like being an aggressor. I'm the biggest and baddest guy on the street, and I like the rule that says I can keep whatever I can steal. I'll say, okay, well, I hope there's more of us than there are of you. And by the way, that's the assumption I thought you were getting to critique me on, Doug, because there is an underlying assumption with everything I'm saying. There are enough reasonable people in the world to make this movement go. Now, that's my assumption. And I think I'm right about it. And I think you know deep down I'm right about it too. Because if most people act this way in their personal lives, right? If you come to my house or I come to your house or we go to anybody's house, most people aren't going to initiate force against you, or you're not going to initiate force against them. Most people understand on a one-to-one level that being an aggressor is the wrong thing. We do have enough reasonable people. What they're not seeing is how this principle applies to groups, including the government, and how it applies to all of the issues. They're seeing government as some exempt entity from this principle. And we can get into that discussion with them, and we should, but we need to proceed from their agreement. In fact, in my book, after I lay out the principle, I have a chapter that is called Swear a Blood Oath. I say just kidding, but not really, right? Can you agree to live the rest of your life without violating this principle? I don't call them hypocrites until after I have laid out the principle in great detail. But if you understand exactly the ins and outs of the principle we're talking about here, and you still disagree, okay, I do call you a hypocrite. Most people will agree with this principle. Our job is to make sure they stay consistent across all of the issues. That's why in my book, I don't talk about any issues until after I have laid out the principle. I've addressed objections to the principle. In fact, one is, my last objection is, you might just be unreasonable. There are people like that in the world. I've represented lots of them. And I say, okay, all I can do is hope there's more of us than you. There are people, we're not going to get everybody.
Mark, that is a fantastic extemporaneous presentation. I think all you've got to do is transcribe what you've just said, and the book is written, and it would be very effective. So let's say that the three of us are all convinced of the correctness of what you're saying, and I think we are.
Yep.
How do we cookie cutter this mother and take the show on the road?
Well, this is what I'm not an expert in, right? I need your help and I need the help. This is the only reason I'm talking to libertarians, Doug. And when I say libertarians, I'm including the anarcho-capitalist, the voluntarist, whatever label you want to call it. They're all the
Even
same.
the Randites? You think
The
even the
Randite,
Randites?
whatever. The people who agree with this principle already. They may call it the non-aggression principle. The reason I'm talking to this group is not because I think that if we could just muster this group, we're in good shape. We need to talk to the people who have never heard of the principle and don't know anything about this. But the reason I'm taking the show to libertarians right now is I want to get a little initial momentum going. We need to get a good website, because the most I can hope for is to get out there and try to get people to go to liveandletlive.org. That's the most I can get across in a short message. But if I can do that, let's sell them there. Let's put videos there. Let's put arguments there. Let's get them to join the movement. There are other bells and whistles I'm pushing along the way too. There's a retired Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals senior judge who's working with me, and we've drafted, he loves Live and Let Live as well. We've drafted a constitutional amendment. Now, I don't think this is necessarily the only way to get there, but this would be a fun project. If you said to me, Mark, draft up a constitutional amendment that you think would have the biggest impact right now on our legal system, what would you draft? Okay, well, in my book is a constitutional amendment. So as the movement gets bigger and bigger and bigger, we can ride that constitutional amendment and start pushing that and maybe make that argument. I'm anticipating conferences around the world. I would love, my goal is to do one conference every month in a different country so we can really rally the world around. It's got to be a world effort, a world effort. We're not looking at a free society anymore. Our society is the globe, and we're not going back. You may hate globalism. The word may make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, but that's our society now. We just saw that. Somebody did something in China that created harms all over the world that affected us. We got to get the world on board. We have to. The threats can be brought from anywhere now around the world. So it has to be a world movement. It should be a world peace movement. Can you believe there's no peace movement in the world right now? We're the world's only real peace movement. I say that because there's no way you could be a real peace movement if you're not pushing this principle. So I can't wait for some group to stand up and say, no, we're also a world peace movement. Mark, you shouldn't say this. I'm going to say, well, how do you feel about the principle? They're going to say, huh? I'm going to say, well, so you're supporting aggression. How can you possibly be a peace movement while you're pushing aggression? Now, if there is another movement out there that says we support the same principle and we're a peace movement, then I'll change my slogan to the world's best peace movement. But for right now, we're the world's only real peace movement. We got to get the message out there with conferences. I want marches in the streets. And at the end of the day, Doug, here's how things change. We just got marijuana legalized. How did it happen? It happened because some politicians who have been against it for many years said, you know what? I woke up this morning and I decided to change my position on legalized marijuana. Why did they do that? Because people changed their minds on legalized marijuana. And they saw the polls that said more than 50% now want legalized marijuana. So the spineless politicians who believe in nothing said, okay, other than keeping their seat, said, okay, I'll change my mind. And that's one way things got changed. Another way is some politicians said, you know what, I'm not changing my mind. And they got voted out and other politicians got voted in. The only other way to change the system is a revolution, which we could have a revolution. The American Revolution, as you know, was a thought revolution. At least this is what the founders said. The war was not the revolution. The revolution was a revolution in thought, and things changed that way. I would prefer they change very peacefully and very easily, but they have to change one way or another because I fear If we don't succeed soon, we have real existential threats. We have artificial intelligence. If you think this pandemic was bad, wait till they start synbio, wait till they start creating much more deadly pandemics. There's nukes all over the world. Imagine if Pakistan and India get into some dispute, the rest of the world's existence could be terminated. Like, we have to win this argument soon. This is no longer just a fun discussion. I don't think it's too strong to say the very existence of life on Earth may hinge on the success of this movement. I don't think that's putting it too strongly. By far, this is the most important thing going on in the world. Until my dying breath, I'm committing to spend whatever activism time and money I have is going to be going to the Live and Let Live project. And yours should too, both of you and everybody else listening to this. I'm not arguing that your life should exist to push Live and Let Live, but I am arguing whatever slice of time, energy, money, effort, whatever you guys have towards changing the world in a right direction, I'm advocating that you put 100% of that into the Live and Let Live movement. And I'll also say there is still room. We haven't kicked anything off yet. We haven't listed who the founders of this movement are. I'm just waiting for people to step up and say, you know what, Mark, I'm going to push the bus in the right direction. I want to be a founder of this movement. I'm bringing my influence, my energies, my money, my talent, my whatever to bear. Let's make it happen. So I'm inviting you and everybody listening to this show, get your ass over to liveandletlive.org. Join the damn movement. I don't need any money from you on this. I need your email address and tell me you're a member of the movement so I can get out there and say, we got a growing movement. I speak for lots of people, but more importantly, spread it around on social media, blast it out, help with the podcast, donate some money. There are endless things you can do if you want to help improve the world. Get involved. Stop sitting around and let's stop talking to each other about this stuff. We got to reach out to the people of the world who have never heard of libertarianism or the principle or anything.
Well, Mark, I have to say what I think is brilliant about this is from a marketing standpoint, is the way you positioned it. I think that all the other organizations that are attempting to push back against encroaching forces that are out there are all positioning themselves as oppositional forces, which are, they're going to be targeted and dismantled. And if they, because you can fight, because if you're opposing, if you think the state isn't growing and it's getting more powerful, and you oppose the state directly, then you're giving the state essentially almost an excuse to come at you. And I think that we've seen some of this, with them, the Biden's kind of sort of, talk about domestic terrorism and so forth. And this fundamentally being, which I think most people don't understand about libertarian ideas, is that they start with this non-aggression principle as the first and foremost thing, which means absolutely no violence under, unless, except for in self-defense. It cannot exist otherwise. I think that gets lost in the message, I think, fundamentally about libertarianism. And
Totally.
And
that's
I think
what's wrong with it.
Again, one of many things. But I think the other thing but what you're doing is positioning it as a peace movement. I think it's brilliant because it's hard to choke out water. And that's what you really have when you have a movement that's like that. And the ones that have really been effective fundamentally around the world have, had that component to it. So whether it be Martin Luther King or whether it be Gandhi or whatever.
Yeah, I can tell you what we're doing different, what we've changed just from typical libertarianism. Obviously, the aspirational values, libertarianism doesn't speak of that. So the guy who, say, for example, the white supremacist restaurant owner who doesn't want to serve Jews and blacks or whoever, the most a libertarian can say here is the right to trade includes the right not to trade. They have every right to do that. And then they can offer up an economic argument for why maybe they won't exist over the future. But the Live and Let Liver can say, look, we agree with that. This guy's got every right to be maybe even a jerk, or at least hold horrible positions. So long as they don't violate the rule, they should be left alone. However, that guy's not part of our movement. He's not trying to get us to peace. We're pushing open-mindedness and tolerance. I'm just going to tell you, we're not going to lose hardly anybody here because these white supremacists, most of them aren't good libertarians anyways. They don't really understand the principle. But by pushing aspirational values, we can now welcome so many more people into the movement who don't like the idea that we can't call that store owner immoral if we want. So he's not part of our movement. Doesn't include such people. Our movement includes other people. So we've done that. We're also presenting it differently because it's not the non-aggression principle. Who the hell knows what that means? You sound like a pacifist. Live and let live is something around the world. Already people love it. The second you say live and let live, the wind is at your back. People want to agree. They already got shirts printed up all over the world that say live and let live. There's a way to say it in every language already. We're not arguing about crazy little things. Like I said, capitalism versus socialism, the size of government. We're cutting off little implementation disagreements. We're saying, look, local communities can decide this stuff. Let's not be at each other's throats on all of these little divisive issues. Let's focus like a laser beam on the critically important principle. When somebody says to me, I'm a libertarian, the only thing I hear is they know what the non-aggression principle is and they agree with it. But if you ask most libertarians, what does it mean to be a libertarian? You're not going to get that answer. Many of them, in my opinion, at least 50% of them don't even know what the non-aggression principle is. They like a mishmash of issues.
Yeah.
I don't want to be too critical.
I totally agree. There's not much principle there. I completely agree with that. I have one suggestion for you. That was just kind of, as you're talking about it, the global, as soon as you start talking about global, and I understand the need, like good ideas should be spread globally. Like I'm a totally supporter of that. But like, as soon as you start talking about that, I, as somebody who is, I listening, don't know that now I have no idea what I can do for it. But when you say, but when we're talking about the making sure we get a good district attorney in my area, making sure that we have, reasonable policies for the businesses, making sure that we're whatever, like, then, you said you want to see people marching in the street. Well, but you're not going to, the reason why I think in America, why you don't see people protesting like you would in France or other places, for instance, is because we present most of the issues of the world are presented outside of ourselves, essentially, to people. You know what I mean? It's almost abstracted. But when this is, the live and let live, that idea, the peace movement, right? That idea, those things are things that most people I know certainly agree with. But when you, in the local basis, on a local chapter and local in your neighborhood, you can do what this looks like. I think is the call to action that gets it more traction, actually, than the global call to action. Do you know what I'm saying? Because
I'm like a double-barreled shotgun here. I think that we should act locally. Things are very important locally, but I also think we need to speak globally. And I can tell you, if you were in our monthly leaders meetings where the different chapter leaders from different parts of the world get together, and by the way, Africa's leading the charge right now. We got about 10 different countries in Africa. In fact, they ran their own Live and Let Live conference a couple of weekends ago that they asked me to come speak at. And when you see guys from Nigeria and Kenya and Cameroon all around the world flashing the Hawaiian shaka saying live and let live, and their attitude is Africa will lead the world in live and let live. I can't tell you how inspiring this is. And to hear guys come on with the accents from Australia and from Poland and from Austria and from Italy and from different places around the world, this global feeling of maybe brotherhood or kinship or whatever, where you're working on this global peace movement inspires you like nothing else. And look, we can't bury our heads in the sand and just say, if we can get our local town to be a great bastion of freedom, okay, we still got lots of things to deal with. There's the state, there's the federal government, there are threats from China. I mean, Pakistan and India get into a fight and we're all dead. Like, we got to deal with these problems.
But how can I? But here's my point is though, what can I do about Pakistan and India? Like, absolutely jack shit. Like, literally.
I disagree with you. Let me tell you.
I can donate money to somebody who can go talk about it. But I can, it's abstracted. It's what I can do about global warming. It's what I can do about saving the whales. It's what I can do about all these other things, but none of them have to do with the fact when I open my door, there are potholes. Nothing has to do with the fact that and so, but if you abstract it too much, it's high mind. And I know it's the beauty of what you're doing is you're taking the conversation to a meta level, which was where we can find agreement. And I think that's really important. But the call to action for people, the call to action, of course, in the streets of Nigeria, of course, in Pakistan, that's all fantastic. But you don't see shit happening in Denver or New York or LA or anywhere else. And I am just saying, like, so I mean, people do want to do stuff. They do want to do something though. And if you focus on the local part of it, I think you get more traction in the US than you will otherwise get. Just my opinion.
Well, I don't know. And, like I said, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I'm not a marketing guy, so I don't know for sure. But what I'm saying is I want to bring it to the reasonable people of the world. And if we're going to get the world in order, we got to appeal to the world. We need a group in India. We need a group in Pakistan. They need to start having meetings. They need to be connected to the rest of the movement. And we need to eventually have a conference there in both places. We need to start changing hearts and minds. And we got to do this. There is no alternative to making this happen. The only way that we're going to be in charge of things is when we get enough people on our side where we get control of the big gun. I hate to say it like that, but that's the reality of the world. We want to impose, whether they like it or not, the live and let live principle on everybody. And I don't feel bad about this because really all we're saying is to the people who would be aggressors, we're going to impose upon them that they don't get to be an aggressor, whether you're acting alone or in a group. Sorry, we're not going to tolerate it, and we're going to push back until we can get enough people on our side. It's just an intellectual discussion. So this is an effort to take the best of the intellectual discussion, boil it down to the one thing we actually need agreement on, which is the principle, to put that front and center. Imagine if we called the movement the non-aggression principle movement. It's the same thing as calling it the live and let live movement, right? If we called the principle. But imagine if we said non-aggression principle and people around the world said, I love the non-aggression. Like they don't know what it means yet, but they love the non-aggression principle. They're on board. Okay, 50% of the people in the movement, that will be their level of understanding. I love live and let live, and that's it. Show me where to march. That's okay. We need those people. Some people will have a higher, deeper level of understanding. It's always that case. But we need more people in the streets with fists in the air saying, I love live and let live. I'm for live and let live. I tell people it means exactly what it says. There's a live part. In fact, we're planning on a global international holiday called International Live and Let Live Day. And much of the movement is focused on the let live part, right? But on this day, we want to focus on the live part. Go out and celebrate the fact that you're alive and you're conscious and you're lucky enough to be able to enjoy anything, and celebrate your life on this day. Take a picture of you doing something you love to do, send it in, and we're going to put it on the Live and Let Live website to celebrate Live and Let Live Day 2023 in the best pictures from around the world. I think this is an excellent holiday, and it's something that can bring some kinship with other people around the world. Like we're going through this huge global thing right now. Every country is involved in it. What a great opportunity to start a global movement. We've never had an experience like this on the planet Earth. Here we are, and our idiot politicians with such a tremendous opportunity to unite the world right now are squandering it like they do all over the place. I want the Live and Let Live movement to be born out of the pandemic, to be a global thing where we can start looking at other people around the world as our brothers and our sisters, not our enemies, because they got different color skin. Like we got to get way past this this idiocy of caring about what package people come in, right? Our attitude about this is, of course, you have a right to be racist so long as you don't violate the rule. But let's get way past it. Who cares about the color of somebody's skin or where they're born or something like this? We need to get past this if we're going to survive as a species. So we're putting it out there. I don't know where it's going to go, but to my last breath, I'm going to use it to fight for this principle, which is obviously correct. One thing we know, everybody on this and probably everybody listening to this, one thing we know, the world would be so much better off if we simply adopted it. Better off measured by any standard, by higher standards of living, better healthcare, better education, people increasing human happiness, decreasing human suffering. If those are your goals, this is the movement that can get us there. We know that with absolute certainty.
Mark, how have you been able to reach out to these people in Africa so far? How did you do that?
Well, I got connected with a guy named Roland Kingsley, and Roland is a huge activist. He's been connected with Liberty International. In fact, we put some money up to get him to come to this conference. Unfortunately, the powers that be denied him a visa, so he's not here. But Roland used his connections in lots of different countries, told them about Live and Let Live. Immediately, they loved it. This thing caught fire in Africa right now. And Doug, if I could get you on a call with Team Africa, as they call themselves, Team Africa gets my attention once a month. I tell them I'm your slave. Once a month, you use me any way you want. But these guys come in and on the Zoom meetings, it's bam, bam, bam. All these people come in with different accents and different places. Some, frankly, can be hard to understand. But they're very young. They're very enthusiastic. It's spreading like wildfire. Here's a continent that's had nothing but misery on it. They need something like Live and Let Live, and they want to lead the world. They may very well do that. I wish the United States led the world on this. It should lead the world on this, but I'm skeptical about whether it will. But if it comes out of Africa, I'll be very, very happy for the people of Africa. Let's let Live and Let Live come out of Africa. Wherever it comes from doesn't really matter to me, as long as it spreads. And I'm encouraging people to use their social media. Like, we've never been alive at a better time to spread any particular word around the world. This is the best time ever in the history of the planet Earth to start and spread a new movement. We should capitalize on it. People are frustrated on both sides of the political spectrum right now. They're crying for something new. Here we are serving up something what they think is new, what we know is really the freedom philosophy that's been around quite some time. But because we've had intellectuals, we haven't had marketing people. What a horrible job we've done marketing such an obviously good philosophy. We should be, hasn't this bugged you, Doug? It's bugged me for the 30 years I've been involved in the freedom movement. Once the light bulb goes off and you say, now I understand, this is so obvious. Why hasn't this caught fire around the world? It hasn't, because we've done a horrible job explaining it. Well, now we need to do a better job. The problem is urgent. We need to boil it down to what we actually need to say it in the most palatable, welcoming, positive, friendly, open kind of a way. And this so far has been working. In fact, the problems we're having right now are problems of too fast growth, too fast. We haven't, where do we spend our money? Africa wants T-shirts and this, that, and the next thing, and they want some money to get groups and meetings going on, and different chapters around the world want support. I've had to form up a 501c3. I formed up a formal chapter agreement. We did a trademark on this logo. Why did I do that? Because I saw what happened with the Tea Party. I saw a good movement that got started with the Tea Party movement and how it got co-opted by the right and turned into something totally different. I am not going to let that happen with Live and Let Live. I can assure you of one thing. I will not allow the philosophy to be compromised in any way. If you violate that principle any way, whether we like it or not, it should be against the law, period. I'm not going to compromise on it. In fact, other people in the movement, Mark Skousen, I'll mention. Mark Skousen got a little bit involved, and I presented at Freedom Fest, and Mark's a great guy. But the first thing Mark said to me after looking at my book is, hey, Mark, don't you think we should allow some taxation? We need taxation to do this, that, and the next thing. I said, Mark, not only does taxes violate the rule, period, but we don't need them. My chapter on taxation, Doug, if you see it in my book, remember, it comes after I've laid out the principle. It takes me about one paragraph to explain taking somebody's money without their permission violates the rule. And then it takes me many paragraphs to deal with, oh my God, what would happen next? Where I say, look, there are many ways the world could still run just fine without forcing people to pay money for things that they don't want to pay money for. And even if there are some areas where we need to pay for things, like maybe the hardest of issues here would be, in my opinion, public defender services. Let me tell you why. Some people won't be able to afford public defenders, even though we know standards of living the tide will raise all the boats, and probably this problem goes away because we become so much wealthier in a real free society. But imagine there actually still are people who can't pay. People gambled all their money away or something, and now they're accused of a crime. And we want to make sure they get a fair trial because we don't want to punish people who didn't actually violate the principle. So we need to make sure they get a competent public defender. How are we going to pay for that? There are ways we can pay for this, many different ways. You've heard many of these options. I think that, for example, the government in the United States is bankrupt by any measure. What do we do when you're bankrupt? Well, you tally up your assets and you sell them. What are the federal government's assets? They got some nice ones. Things like the Grand Canyon and Yellowstone Park and Yosemite. They should sell these to the highest bidder, the private parties. We know who's going to buy these plots of land. Maybe the Sierra Club will get people to donate and keep it the way it is, but probably not. My guess is the Hyatt's going to buy some nice plots and we'll actually be able to enjoy the Grand Canyon. But what can we do with all of that money that's raised? Well, for starters, we can pay off some of this debt that is going to cripple the world if we don't get a handle around it. We know, Doug, because you and I have been talking about this for 25 years. There's either going to be a default, which will be over time in inflation, or it'll be right away, which will cause complete chaos, or the government will sell some assets and will pay this down and we'll negotiate things like you do in a bankruptcy, right? I know you're owed X, but will you take Y if we give it to you right now? We need to get out of this crushing debt. And then we can park some money in very conservative interest-bearing type accounts. And we can use some of that money to, if we do have rough spots where we need to pay things out of, say, a public till, we can get that done by simply paying it out of this. We could run national lotteries. There are many different things that could be done to raise money to pay for the very few things that we actually need to pay for, that if people couldn't buy, then we'd have to provide for them anyways, like public defender service. So I spend a lot of time dealing with the real concerns that people have. If we eliminated taxes, how could we get this, that, and the next thing? You and I know 99% of those things are very easy. We know how we can get roads and public or private utilities and things, even as we talked about at the beginning, private police services, justice service. We can get all of this stuff. We can solve these problems if we present the solutions that we've been talking about for years and years in a way where people don't shut their brains off the second we open up our mouths. And you know, Doug, because you know me a long time, I've led the discussion totally wrong for many years. I start with the most inflammatory statement possible. You're a guy who does that sometimes too. Guys like me and you, we appreciate that, but it's not the best way to outreach to people who feel different.
I understand. I often use to get a jackass's attention, you have to hit it between the eyes with the 2x4, but that's not the best way to get his attention. I agree.
Probably not.
Talking about Marc Skousen, kind of a neat segue there. Was Mark enthusiastically supportive or grudgingly supportive or not really very supportive at all of the live and let live idea?
Mark was very, very enthusiastic. He came to one of our meetings. And when he saw all the people in the different countries all excited and everybody pushing this Hawaiian shaka, which, by the way, I thought the peace symbol had too much baggage, but the Hawaiian shaka, which means basically aloha in Hawaii, which I've had people on my podcast who have said, you know, the true meaning of aloha is exactly the same as live and let live, but it doesn't have baggage around the world the way the peace symbol does. So to see people in different countries, in Poland going like this, and in Africa going like this, and making this the symbol of our movement, I think he was very, very impressed and very enthused and very excited. I might have turned him off when I said, look, Mark, taxes violate the rule, because Mark has spent, as you know, a long time arguing for the minimalist state. And, you know, I think this is sort of a false thing. I don't care how big the state is. I care that the state doesn't violate the rule. That's really what we get to. So I think maybe he had a little bit of trouble with the no taxes thing, but he was very enthusiastic. And I'm going to hit him up again now that Freedom Fest is over and see if we can get him involved, because, you know, a guy like Marc Skousen could simply connect me to other people in the world, same as like a guy like Doug Casey, who knows everybody in the freedom movement, could, or even just simply saying, hi, I'm Doug Casey, or hi, I'm Marc Skousen. I endorse this live and let live movement. I'm a member. I support it. Get involved. Check out the website. Could be the huge impetus we need just to get the foundation. So when we present this to people around the world, they'll listen to us. They won't be turned off, because we got to get over this hump where people won't just shut their brains off and won't listen to us. Because we know if they do listen to us, we'll convince them.
Well, sign me up, Mark.
Well, Doug, you got to tell me. Look, you're a guy, as much help as you would give, I would take. You're a guy who's been around a long time. You understand the movement. Whatever you see fit to doing with your property, money, time, energy, whatever, I'll take any help you can give. But really, the reasonable people in the libertarian / anarchist crowd, we need these people to get some initial momentum going with this movement. I would do something else if I thought we had a more effective chance of getting our message across. But this is what I think, from talking with people for 30 years, is going to be the most effective approach to communicating our very, very reasonable, very understandable, very effective message, frankly.
Well,
Mark,
Matt knows a lot more about marketing than I do. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I have some ideas. I think I'd like to talk offline with Mark about that.
Love
Actually,
it.
I have some ideas about it that could be helpful. Maybe some people that could be really helpful to you as well. But I think that you definitely convinced me that you've definitely convinced me. I definitely came into this pretty skeptical. Doug forwarded something to me of yours a while ago, and I watched it and I go, yeah, but but I see what you're doing. The positioning as a peace movement, I think, is brilliant. You should, whenever there's some fundamental disagreement in the conversation, you either zoom out or you zoom in, and you can find agreement and zooming out is the most likely course of action. But usually zooming out or zooming in, you can find an agreement. On a mass scale, obviously you have to zoom out, and I think that you've done that. I think you're a strong communicator for the ideas. I haven't heard your provocative side, but I can sense that it exists. But I love the way you're selling this, and I think it's the right way to sell it, and I think it's an effective message, and I think the world is more open to something like this now than they have been, certainly in my lifetime. So I think it's interesting, and I think I'll encourage everyone who watches this, everybody, to go and sign up again on Mark's site. That's liveandletlive.org, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Everybody should go sign up on it. We'll have a link for it in the description of the video. I'll certainly go and sign up there as well. And then I think, Mark, you and I and Doug can all separately discuss ways that we might specifically help. I'm not sure. I don't want to speak for Doug, but I'm sure there's lots of things that Doug can do, and I have some ideas as well.
I love it, Matt. So what would be helpful to me, because I'm at this conference in Columbia, I can't wait to stand up in front of everybody here and really hit them with Live and Let Live. Would be helpful is if maybe you just shot me an email. We can figure out a time and day to get together. Check out the site. Tell me what you love, what you don't like. I'll send both of you the current version of the draft of my book. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. I got no axe to grind here other than I just want to change the world. That's all. Whatever's most effective here is what I want to do. If I could step back and be no part of it and it made it more successful, I would certainly do that. But look, this is for us, but it's also for the rest of humanity. We need to do this for our kids, our grandkids. I don't think it overstates it when I say the fate of the world may hinge on this. Smaller and smaller numbers of people are getting able to do greater and greater harm around the world. And we're not going to reverse this trend. Technology will continue to march. The only thing we can do is try to get control of the mechanisms to really say, look, these should be the rules of human interaction while you're here on the planet, period.
Love it. All right, Mark, thank you so much for your time today. I'll let you get to your conference. Your audience is in for a treat, I have no doubt. So anyways, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much, Mark. Really,
it was nice talking to both of you. Peace, guys. Live and let live.
Thanks.
Thanks, brother. Take care. We'll be in touch.